My name is Emily Hoisington, and this is my language autobiography. I was born and raised in Goose Creek, South Carolina, just 25 minutes away from Charleston. I had two amazing, loving parents who always pushed me to be a strong, thoughtful, and unique person. Having two older sisters, Brittany, who is 6 years older than me, and Beth Ann, who's only 2, they really shaped me into the person I am today. Being closer in age than Brittany and me, Beth and I were very close. Having someone so close in age really helped my language development as we were constantly together. My mom says that I was a very adamant baby. She said that I did not like to be held, touched when I was being put to sleep, or bothered when I was playing with my toys. She says that I was very original, I did my own thing, and that at 22 months she thought that I would even be a leader. My mother says that I was very good at what Halliday calls as the instrumental stage of his 7 functions. I was very aware of what I wanted, and I made that very clear. Being an adamant baby, she said that if I wanted a toy or a bottle, I would scream and reach for it until I got it. At 7 months, my mother said that I began to do what Beverly Otto describes as echolalic babbling. My mother specifically remembers me trying to copy what she did and my sisters did and mimic what they were trying to say until I finally said my first word, which was dada, at 7 months old. This was followed by more and more babbling. I then followed by saying mama and bye-bye at 14 months. My mother loved to read to us. She constantly had books in front of us, whether she was reading to us, my older sister was reading to us, or we were just playing with the books. My mom said that I was perfectly content playing with my toys and books when I was just a baby. By 21 months, she said that I was saying 3 to 4 word sentences, and at 22 months, I knew what the meaning of several words meant, but just could not pronounce them. For example, I knew what a banana was, but I kept calling it a bin-bin. I also kept saying saucy instead of sorry. My mom says that she constantly talked to me, played with me, and made eye contact with me. She also said that I was constantly around children and that she did not let me watch a lot of TV. She knew that a lot of television could cause cognitive delay, which is what Christakis discovered in the effect of block play. Growing up in a neighborhood full of kids, it was easy to go knock on someone's door and ask them to play, especially when you lived next door to your best friends. My best friend was my next-door neighbor, Jordan McLaughlin. Me and Jordan played together every single day, no matter what we had going on. One summer, she even spent the night for 2 weeks straight. According to Wenner in the series Need to Play, children need to do things where they can use their imagination and play without any rules instructed by someone. Jordan and I did just that. We were constantly riding bikes, pretending we were cops, building forts, playing sports, and playing school, using our imaginations and creating different games every day. One thing I always did when I was younger was play school. I constantly had to be the teacher, and I would never be the student. I would create worksheets, tests, quizzes, and everything else you can imagine for my students to do, but I was actually very bossy. I wanted things done my way, and if I wasn't the teacher, I wouldn't play at all. This aided in my language development because as I was being the teacher, I learned new ways to get my point across, ways to handle situations, and I practiced my writing as I made tests and quizzes for my students. From the time I was 4, I was put in a private school in North Charleston called Northwood Academy. It was a Christian-based school which I also believe aided in my development. Growing up in church every Sunday morning, night, and Wednesday night allowed me to be around other children pretty much all the time. Being of the Christian faith, growing up my parents always had us go to church, events such as VBS, kids choir, Sunday school, and music camp. One important artifact that is important to my family is the Bible, which has greatly developed my language and has for my whole family. We've centered our lives around what the Bible has to say. We were taught to choose our words based on what Scripture said and taught to act like Jesus did. Of course, it didn't always go this way, but it was something that my family was centered around. It was the only thing we were centered around. Growing up, we were constantly read and taught Bible stories from the family. We were encouraged to read it on our own and to interpret what it had to say. This helped my cognitive growth as I learned how to interpret what it was saying. My parents were constantly talking to us about it, and even as we were little, this helped shape me into who I am today. At the age of 4, I was able to recognize short sentences and draw pictures of them. In this picture, my teacher wrote, "The fireman is our friend," and I drew a picture of a fireman. By the age of 5, my mother said I was able to read very well and very quickly. One of my favorite things to read when I was little, and would even try to read as I got older, were the I Can Read Well books. These were books that were given to us to teach us how to read, and as we developed more and more, the books became more advanced. I really enjoyed reading the books because each page had a different story. According to Ronnie in the Back to the Basics with Storytelling, storytelling taps into the expertise of oral language and facilitates academic growth. I remember I loved to try and see if I could come up with different ways on how to connect the stories together, and I would always want to share these stories with my mother. My mother said storytelling was one of my favorite things to do. By the time I was in kindergarten, I was writing sentences and speaking in full sentences. As you can see, my spelling and grammar were not completely correct, but I was learning. By the time I was in first grade, my writing skills had developed a lot more, and I was able to write complete sentences with mostly correct grammar and spelling. Part of my essay was even published in our school newsletter. When I got to second grade, my writing was looking great. My handwriting had gotten a lot neater and cleaner, and I was able to begin developing small thoughts into small essays or paragraphs. By the time I got to fourth grade, I was able to write clear, descriptive sentences, and my teacher, Miss Mishu, really began to instill in me a love for writing. One time in 7th grade, we had to write a story about our chapel experience. For me, I loved chapel. I loved listening to the speakers and singing worship songs, but something really was beginning to bug me. I was really upset that our teachers always told us to worship like Jesus, like no one was watching. I became very upset on Friday morning during chapel as I watched all the teachers just sit there on their phones, reading a book or grading papers. So I wrote a story on this, and I discussed how teachers should be setting the examples and should be practicing what they preached. My teacher loved my story and idea so much that she published it in the school newsletter, just like my writing had been published in the first grade. For me, this showed me how much I loved to write because I thought and I was accepted as good as it. One thing that I did lack when I was younger was pragmatic language skills. In the classroom, I was very talkative. My third grade teacher even wrote on several of my report cards, "Emily needs to work on being less talkative in the classroom." Whenever I would talk too much, Miss Clements would make me stand on the line to miss recess or walk laps around the playground instead of recess. For me, because I was a child who loved to play and be a part of things, this was something that I hated and really instilled in me pragmatic language. It's difficult for me from the time I was 5 to about the age of 13 was my ability to say my R's. I would say girl like go and corn like corn. My parents never did anything about this though. They always thought that I would just grow out of it, and around the age of 13 I did. This was something that I was picked on for constantly, and I was very insecure about until I grew out of it. When I was younger and as I got into middle school, I was very involved in sports. I played basketball, swam, and played soccer. Because I was so involved in sports, I was constantly around other kids, and I learned how to be a part of a team. In middle school, I began to really understand pragmatic language. I began to understand the power of words and how they affect other people. Being on a team and playing sports really shaped me into who I am today. It taught me to fight for my passion, to work hard, and to keep my priorities straight. In high school, I continued to play these sports, and they essentially became who I was. I played sports year-round. I was very into basketball as I played in 3 state championships and won many awards. I was also a big swimmer and won the 50-yard freestyle in 2011. As I came to college, my language development continued to grow. I took several courses that aided in this development, such as English, writing, and language courses. I also founded a nonprofit organization called Charleston Hope in 2012 that serves the Title I schools of Charleston. Because I have a passion for the inner city, hearing how some of these students at a Title I school didn't get a Christmas present really broke my heart, and I decided to do something about it. So my freshman year, because of the college and local businesses, we adopted 900 students for Christmas, providing them with a wrapped gift, a hot meal, and quality time with volunteers. The following year, in 2013, we adopted 1,500 students. This has really enhanced my language skills as I am constantly writing emails making flyers, and speaking in front of large crowds. Last year I even spoke in front of a crowd of about 13,000 people. It was a scary thing, but it pushed me to exceed in my language and become comfortable speaking in front of all different types of people. Language is a key factor of life. We all communicate in some way in order to get by day. I think Dr. Mary Blake Jones had us create our language autobiography so that we could see how our language was developed. In doing this, I was able to prove all of the things I've learned about language and the importance of interaction, play, and development, as well as work on my storytelling skills. In doing this, I was able to see language development from a completely different perspective as I examined my own personal development. And that is why I believe that Dr. Mary Blake Jones had us complete this project.